Welcome to the deep dive. We're here to sift through all that information, cut through the noise, and really pull out the key insights so you can understand what's actually going on. Today, we're jumping into a really high-stakes situation, geopolitically speaking. We're looking at recent Israeli military actions inside Iran and the very different, but maybe surprisingly linked reactions from Benjamin Netanyahu and Donald Trump.
Yeah, and the sources we're working with here are, well, they're pretty fascinating. They really push us to figure out the red lines for these two leaders, those critical points where they feel they have to act. We'll be exploring kind of the nature of their alliance, which is complex, and maybe most importantly, what their actions could mean for U.S. involvement down the line in, let's face it, a really volatile part of the world. Our goal today is to give you a much clearer picture of the strategies, the calculations, and also the big risks involved.
Exactly. We're going to peel back the layers on these different viewpoints to really get at what's truly at stake. We want you walking away feeling well-informed on this. Okay, let's unpack this. So let's set the immediate scene first. In just the last few weeks, Israeli warplanes went deep into Iran. We're talking Natanz, Iraq, Fordow, key nuclear sites. And the stated goal was pretty blunt, crippling their core nuclear abilities. So, yeah, not a small incident.
No, definitely not. And Tehran, well, they didn't hang around. The sources say ballistic missiles hit U.S.-linked bases in Iraq almost immediately in response. And you had Ayatollah Khamenei himself vowing severe consequences. What's really striking, and maybe critical here, is just how fast and direct that pushback was.
Right. So, okay, given that kind of immediate, sharp reaction from Iran, what was Netanyahu actually saying about why they did it? Why take such a big step right now?
Well, he was very direct about it. He said Israel had intelligence, pretty specific stuff apparently, showing Iran was literally days away from nuclear breakout, that point where they can assemble a weapon very quickly. So he framed the strikes as preventive, hitting centrifuges, uranium, the delivery systems. His justification was basically, if we waited, it would have been too late. Stark.
That's a powerful claim. What about the U.S.? Were they involved or even told beforehand?
Netanyahu's line on that was, well, pretty firm, unequivocal, really. He said, and I quote, "We inform friends, but we don't ask for permission." Then he added, "Israel will defend itself by itself if necessary." It really paints this picture of independent action, doesn't it? And maybe, draws a line about the limits of the alliance.
That phrase, "we don't ask for permission," it really stands out. Do the sources touch on what that means for the U.S. relationship, like especially if things go wrong or with a different administration, maybe?
Well, the sources don't really game out all the what-ifs for different scenarios. But that statement itself, it highlights this strategic autonomy that Israel clearly values very highly. It puts the focus squarely on what Israel sees as its immediate security needs, first and foremost, which, could put the U.S. in a position where they're reacting rather than shaping events beforehand.
Okay, so let's dig a bit deeper then into Netanyahu's perspective. The sources describe his tone as measured, assertive. Apparently, he's also talked about how his trust in Trump evolved. What's the story there?
Yeah, he gives Trump specific credit for two things: moving the U.S. embassy to Jerusalem and pulling out of the Iran nuclear deal, the JCPOA. Netanyahu actually said Trump understood something Obama and others didn't. Deterrence matters. Words matter. Red lines matter. So it points to this shared view, perhaps, of a tougher, less compromising approach to foreign policy.
But then there's that recurring criticism, isn't there, that Israel might be, pulling the U.S. into a conflict it doesn't want. How does Netanyahu counter that?
Oh, he pushes back hard on that one. His argument is basically, if Iran becomes nuclear, the whole world loses. He says, we're not dragging the U.S., we're buying time for all of us. So he's reframing it, you see. It's not just about Israel's safety, it's a global threat. And Israel is like the first line of defense for everyone.
That's quite a frame. So just how far is he willing to go? What's the limit for Israel's actions here?
His definitive statement on that is pretty stark, honestly. He said, as far as we must, the Jewish state will never again be passive in the face of annihilation threats. It leaves zero ambiguity about how seriously Israel views the threat and its readiness to act preemptively.
Yeah.
It suggests, a pretty open-ended commitment.
Okay, so Netanyahu's actions are stark, direct, but Trump's response seems, well, different. More complex, maybe. Let's switch gears and look at former President Trump. His tone is noted as more casual, confident, but his statements sometimes seem contradictory. What was his first reaction to the Israeli strikes?
He praised them, called them very strong, very decisive, and he added, Bibi knows what he's doing. Standard praise. He also made sure to mention their past collaborations, calling things like Jerusalem, ditching the Iran deal, and the Abraham Accords big wins. reinforce their alignment on those issues.
Right, but this is where it gets tricky, isn't it? Because recently he's praised the strikes, but then he also issued this 60-day ultimatum to Iran and then suggested maybe diplomacy could be back on the table. It seems all over the place. How does he explain that?
Yeah, his explanation is, well, it's classic Trump, perhaps. He said, it's called leverage. That's what I do. When you're unpredictable, people listen. That's his rationale. And about that 60-day ultimatum, he clarified, saying it doesn't mean I wait 60 days. Could be tomorrow, could be never. Depends on Iran. So it's deliberate ambiguity, basically, designed to keep Tehran off balance, according to him.
That unpredictability. It sounds like it could be a strength for him, maybe. But does the analysis suggest it creates any problems, like confusion for allies, maybe even Israel, or even folks back home?
Oh, absolutely. The analysis points that out directly. While he uses it as leverage, it definitely creates uncertainty among allies and enemies alike, which for Israel is described as both an opportunity and a risk.
Yeah.
It keeps everyone guessing, which, yeah, can be a strategic plus, but it could also be pretty destabilizing in such a tense situation.
And then there were those reports that Trump had actually vetoed an Israeli plan to assassinate top Iranian leaders. Did he comment on that?
He was pretty evasive on that specific point. Said, I don't confirm classified things, which is standard, I suppose. But then he added something quite revealing. But I'll say this, we don't rush into wars. We win them. Big difference. You can't fix the Middle East by just dropping bombs. So not a direct answer, but it hints at maybe a more cautious line on certain types of direct action than some might think.
Interesting. Okay, so looking potentially ahead, where would Iran stand if Trump were to return for a second term? What's his message to them?
It's very direct, very binary. He says, if I return, they'll either talk or they'll regret it. That's simple. High stakes, no ambiguity there.
Okay, so we have Netanyahu's clear determination, Trump's, let's say, calculated ambiguity. How does the expert analysis in the sources sort of pull this all together? Give us the bigger picture. Let's start with Netanyahu. What's seen as his endgame here?
Well, the analysis suggests his strategy isn't purely military. It's deeply political, too. He's seen as playing a long game. The aim seems to be proving Israel won't be pushed aside, solidifying its position, and maybe, crucially, forcing America's hand if things get really bad. So the strikes are described as not just military, they're political. It's about leverage and influence.
That makes sense. And what about Trump's communication style? We talked about the ambiguity. What are the wider implications of that, according to the analysis?
Yeah, the analysis notes his ambiguity is consistent with his first term. It's a known tactic. And while he uses that unpredictability as leverage, the flip side is it creates uncertainty for everyone, allies included. So for Israel, like we touched on, it's seen as both an opportunity and a risk. It's that double-edged sword again. Could strengthen deterrence, could just sow confusion when clarity is needed.
Right. And of course, both leaders have domestic politics to think about, don't they? What's the take on the political angles for Trump and Netanyahu and all this?
That's definitely highlighted. Both Trump clearly thinking about 2024 and Netanyahu working to secure his legacy amidst his own challenges. They both seem to use Iran as a common thread. The situation becomes effectively a kind of battlefield for their political futures, using foreign policy crises for potential domestic advantage as part of the calculation.
So, okay, the million-dollar question then. Could this escalation, this back and forth, actually lead to a direct conflict between the U.S. and Iran?
The assessment seems to be, not yet. We're not quite at that point. But, and this is a big but, every Israeli strike like this increases the odds. Yeah, the real danger zone, the analysis warns, is if Iran hits back at American assets, even if it's accidental, even indirectly, then, quote, it's game on. That seems to be the tripwire everyone's watching.
So where does this leave us and you listening? We've really dug into these two distinct approaches to Iran. Netanyahu's seems very clear, uncompromising, urgent. He sees Iran as this ticking clock, right, and acts accordingly. Then you have Trump, more calculated, elusive, transactional, viewing it all like a chessboard where being unpredictable is a major part of his strategy.
Yeah, and I think the really critical point that comes out of the analysis is the inherent danger, the possibility that Israel may act faster than Washington can respond, and that in those gaps, between policy decisions and political realities, diplomacy might just get squeezed out. It might not survive.
It's fascinating how different their styles are, but maybe they end up pushing things in a similar direction sometimes. So the question lingers, could one Israeli missile really drag the U.S. into a much bigger war? Or, are the back-channel talks that the sources mention, are they actually going to buy everyone a bit more time? What really stands out to you as the most critical piece of this puzzle? We hope this deep dive has given you that shortcut to feeling well-informed on what's undeniably a vital subject. Until next time, stay curious, stay aware,